I'm Walter Olson. I work here at the Cato Institute and blog on nanny state issues at overlawyered.com. I have brought with me today an object that I'm not sure it was entirely legal for me to bring into my office at the Cato Institute today. Before you get too excited, it has nothing to do with what Mike Ricks was talking about. And it's not even a high-capacity gun magazine. You can get in so much trouble or not for brandishing in the district. But it is a little dish, circa 1930s, 1940s. And I bought it at an antique outlet because it has a pretty painting of an ocean liner from one of the great days of ocean liners. But it is more than just a pretty painted dish. Drug experts would identify it as tobacco paraphernalia, or as they used to be called back then, ashtrays. And if you think you can't get in legal trouble for bringing an ashtray to your office, you don't know Mayor Bloomberg and his friends around the country. I'd like to quote the wonderful Christopher Hitchens, who is so much missed. He's been gone a little bit more than a year now. And in 2004, he was just kind of in the middle of his ideological journey from left libertarian to not so left libertarian. And he spoke at a Cato Institute seminar. I like to think this was formative in making him realize that the waters were welcoming. But this was in the throes of one of Mayor Bloomberg's first big initiatives on the restaurant smoking ban. And Hitchens was very moved by it. And I'd like to quote, actually I'd like to quote him at some length in the confidence that you would rather listen to Christopher Hitchens than listen to Walter Olson. And he starts out talking about the arguments being levied, the defense, as it were, the people who didn't want a universal ban on smoking, said, certainly it's a good idea if there be many non-smoking bars and others to cater to smokers. Why not have some for everyone? Why not let workers sort themselves out? And the answer was no. Someone might have only the option of taking the one job as a bartender or wait person, and that might be in a smoky bar, and that would be exposure to an occupational hazard. And in order to protect that one person, everyone has to be kept out of all such establishments. And I won't go through the logic, which Hitchens picked apart very nicely, but then he went on to the other problems. First he said, there used to be areas like the West Village in New York or North Beach in San Francisco that are now dull and boring and have to be policed. And I think that's a terrible loss. I write better when I have a cigarette and a drink. I'm more fun to be with. Other people seem less boring, like he said. The life of Bohemia, of the small cafe and the little bar that never quite closes, is essential to cultural production. What an assertion. What an interesting assertion. It may seem like a small thing, like Hitchens goes on. It doesn't add very much to the GMP. But if you take it away, you may not know what you've lost until it's too late. And then he backs up and he engages with some of the arguments. Couldn't this be saving a life here and there? Might not be better for people to live longer, even if there is no New York nightlife anymore. And he says, all right, assume all this to be true. Let's concede them all of this. He goes on and says, there would still be the question of enforcement, that awkward little bit that comes between your conception of utopia and your arrival there. The enforcement bit. You could appoint regulators and inspectors to enforce the law. You would take quite a lot of them, but you could do it. There are such people. I know about them, Hitchens says, because they've come after me. And then he tells a story about his office at Vanity Fair. And it starts out, he has a cigarette with his editor, who also smokes, Graydon Carter, at Vanity Fair. And then some anonymous person on their staff drops a dime on them, informs to the city. Yes, this goes on. I mean, the Bloomberg system is set up to encourage this to happen, and it happened even at a place like Vanity Fair magazine. So the police show up. You're busted. Then he goes on. Graydon went on a holiday, and I went back to Washington, and his office was empty. But they came round again, and they issued him another ticket because he had on his desk an object that could have been used as an ashtray. In his absence, with no one smoking, but there are officials who have time enough to come around and do that. The worst part, Hitchens says, is that the staff has to become the enforcers, the waitresses have to become the enforcers, the maitre d' has to become the enforcers, because they're up for the fines if they don't. So everyone is made into a snitch. And it's funny because I thought of that same C.S. Lewis quotation that Caleb started us on with the introduction. And Hitchens, as you would expect, approaches the subject very differently from C.S. Lewis. When would you ever expect them to approach it the same way? And Hitchens winds up, I found the C.S. Lewis quote about the soul of the person who would like to control your life, I found it very convincing and compelling, and yet here's what Hitchens has to say in a different vein. He talks about how most of the defense, to the extent that the bars and restaurants had it, was very oriented toward money. You know, they'll go out of business, they won't make enough money. And no one was saying, is there a question of liberty involved? Is there a matter of freedom? Is there a matter of the relationship of citizens to each other? And something about it made me worry and makes me worry still. And here's the wind-up of his remarks. The old slogan of the anarchist left, this is what Hitchens most identified with until rather late in his life, used to be that the problem is not with those who have the will to command. They will always be there. We feel we understand where the authoritarians come from. The problem is the will to obey. The problem is the people who want to be pushed around, the people who want to be taken care of, the people who want to be a part of it all, the people who want to be working for a big, protective brother. Well, we miss him terribly, and no one says it quite that well, and yet we have new media filling in part of the gap. As a couple of speakers have mentioned, new media has been pretty great on the nanny state, and I think it reached its pinnacle of accomplishment with the hashtag on Twitter, Bloomberg movie titles. Because movie theaters, of course, are covered by the size of drinks regulation and proposals on popcorn butter and so forth. And so I'll just read a few of the hashtag Bloomberg movie titles that especially fetch me. I know what you ate last summer. The appropriately sized Lebowski. 16 carrots. Diet, my darling. There will be blood sugar tests. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Kwan. No Country for Old Menus. And all that Bloomberg allows. Well, you've heard this before. What they fear most is to be making fun of. This is the single thing that makes them most uncomfortable, is to be made fun of. So good job, Twitter, on that. My own contributions, I am on Twitter, but as Carolyn mentioned, I've been rolling this blog along for 12 and a half years now over lawyer.com. And when I started, there really was more or less nothing else. There were a few legal sites that were not in blog format, but there was no Voloc.com or Glenn Reynolds or anything, at least not in blog format. And so you may wonder, why did I begin this process? And you would expect some strange obsessive-compulsive answer, and sure enough, that's true. I just wanted to save notes on things that I might someday write about. The journalists call this saving string. You clip 7 or 8 weird little stories about something going wrong, and eventually you get around to writing about it. So little did I know that I was starting off what would, I suppose, in the realm of legal policy, be the world's biggest ball of string. And of course, I never did get around to writing about many of these things. I was asked in the early years by other journalist types, aren't you afraid that if you put your notes for interesting stories out there, someone will steal them and write that story? And for the first couple of years, I was worried. And then I realized that, please, go out there, cover these things. Don't worry whether I'm going to get around to it. And among the benefits of putting small bits up for so long is that you do begin to see patterns. You get a little early warning system of who some of the bad actors are. So when the Harvard School of Public Health is in the news, as it seems to be every week or two, attacking trans fats or attacking salt or something, I think, oh yes, Harvard School of Public Health, and I can quickly dialogue with the search or attack. The story from 2 years ago, Harvard researchers want fat kids taken from their homes. A pair of Harvard scholars writing in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and there are a lot of baddies there too, advocate stripping away the custody rights of parents of super obese children. And one of the lawyer researchers, lawyer public health researcher, what a job description, who wrote the studies is quoted as follows: despite the discomfort posed by state intervention, she doesn't say who the discomfort is to, it may sometimes be necessary to protect a child. And one of the sentences from the general piece is as follows: even relatively mild parenting deficiencies, such as having excessive junk food in the home or failing to model a physically active lifestyle, may contribute to a child's weight problem. Well, once you've begun saving strength on them, you will never be quite as impressed by the Harvard School of Public Health. And